Hello, welcome to Eli's amazing World Literature podcast. Today we'll be covering the Iliad and Odyssey, and sadly, our special guest for the show had to cancel last minute. She got pretty tired, so she's taking her leave on the bed right now. But anyway, as I was saying, today we're focusing on the Iliad and Odyssey by Homer, which are two epics that are 24 chapters apiece, or 24 books apiece. Excuse me. Um, and today we were focusing on the main themes and the connection between the two, because as we know, Homer wrote Odyssey after he wrote the Iliad, because it is a continuation of one of the main characters, Odysseus, as he is traveling back home from the Trojan War that took place in the Iliad. So let's get on with the discussion. The first theme we have for the Iliad is throughout the whole entire story, there's a sense of honor that is portrayed by the characters, and the sense of honor is very highly renowned. All men and just about everyone has a sense of honor and a sense of a dignity to carry on with their mission. Um, the biggest example of this honor that comes up first off in the story is with Achilles and Agamemnon. With Achilles and Agamemnon, it was a very it started off rough because, of course, Agamemnon took from Achilles. Forgive me for the names. It's a lot of names. Briseis. Briseis from Agamemnon. Uh, that is what Agamemnon took from Achilles, and Achilles, therefore, as his honor was hurt, he withdrew himself from the Greeks and did not participate until later on in the story to help the Greeks fight the Trojans in the Trojan War, or the Achaeans. His sense of honor was hurt, therefore, because he lost what he had viewed Briseis as a prize, not more say as a actual as of compassion to Briseis. His honor and his glory were stolen from him by Agamemnon. But that is one of the most important focuses and themes throughout the Iliad is honor. And right along with honor plays pride, which is another theme that was constant throughout the Iliad. Pride is hurt very easily, and pride is the downfall of many people. Being prideful is not always a good thing. You can have a certain amount of pride, but again, Achilles' pride was hurt because Agamemnon took Briseis from him, and he only after Agamemnon personally apologized to Achilles that Achilles came back to help Agamemnon in the war, and it was something to see Achilles, one of the great heroes, be to have his pride hurt and sulk about it for over just his pride, not over the moral of the whole entire situation. It was very, very interesting to read that. But the pride is very huge in the Iliad. One of the key points. Another, not along with the pride, but the next theme we're going on to is fate. The fate of all the characters in the Iliad and in Homer's writings are all preset. Fates have been set. The characters don't know when they're gonna die, but the fate of the men, such as Achilles knew that his fate was destined to end in the Trojan War, and he had a choice to either not end it there or live longer and not end his fate in the Iliad or in the Trojan War, or he could have pursued to live longer, or excuse me, to end his life. Not end his life, but his fate would come sooner in Trojan War, which is evident by his mother, who had told him. I can't remember her name off the top of my head. Please forgive me. But yes, fate for every single one of the major characters in the Iliad was preset, and at some point their fate caught up with them, and they either perished or fate would have them to do something, move on to something great. The next point in the Iliad, the next major theme per se, was the war. The war itself was the Trojan War against the Greeks and the the Greeks and the Trojans. Not much more to say. War was present. There were times of peace. There were times of war. most of it was fighting, but at certain points, towards near the end, there was a time of peace after Hector had been slain, that Achilles went back to his tents, and there was a brief period of peace before the Greeks pursued the Trojans and destroyed the city. Moving on, number 5 would be mortality. All the soldiers and the sons and daughters of the gods were mortal. They could be killed. Now the gods themselves were immortal, such as Athena and Zeus, Poseidon. All of those gods were immortal and couldn't be killed. They could be hurt, but they could not be killed per se. But mortality always was the downfall of. The gods could give the soldiers, give certain people, such as. Give me a second. Such as. Everyone was mortal. Everyone was mortal except for the gods. And there were certain times where the gods would gave certain men the ability to have characteristics of the gods, yet at the same time they would eventually perish. They would eventually die. Or they would live out their days until they naturally died. Or worse, vice versa. But that was one of the main things. And these are all both shared with the Odyssey as well as with the Iliad. But for the Iliad, mortality was one of the main focuses that Homer honed in on. Love is the next theme to the Iliad. That was a key theme that really resonated a lot throughout. It kept recurring throughout the Iliad. Love was one of the driving factors for most of the conflict of the Iliad, with Paris and Helen, and how Paris resided in Helen's chamber, and that Aphrodite brought Paris back to Helen's chamber after Helen was going to be killed by, in Paris's duel, which he was going to be killed in. Brought him back to Helen's chamber to keep him safe, but still, because of love, that was the reason Aphrodite took Paris away from that scenario so that he would be spared. But love was ever present throughout the Iliad in a surprising amount. The next would be vengeance. Vengeance was it is not one of the main themes of the Iliad, one of the lesser themes, but at the same time it is a very important theme. One of the most significant scenarios of vengeance in the Iliad is Achilles avenging Procrus. Whenever Procrus took Achilles' armor and took his troops out to fight with the Greeks to push the Trojans back, Procrus was killed. And once Procrus was killed, and once Achilles got news of that, Achilles sought vengeance against Hector, and therefore came back, and Achilles had a new set of armor made, a new shield, and came back and brought vengeance toward Procrus and slew Hector. Now, those were the main themes of the Odyssey, or the Iliad. Moving on to the Odyssey, most of the same themes are then present in the Odyssey, not as heavy, but are still underlying and keep pushing along throughout the course of the story. And first of all is fate. Fate again comes up in the Odyssey as one of the main things. Fate of Odysseus is carried out throughout the story. He was destined to come back to his wife. And both stories show people are destined to meet destined to what they have been predestined to by the gods. So, as Odysseus was making his way back, he faced many trials, but he was destined to make it through those trials to come back to his wife. Justice is another big key in the Odyssey, because justice was more of a kind of a poetic deal in the Odyssey, because an example of this would be the Cyclops. When Odysseus and his men escaped the Cyclops, his father, the Cyclops' father, Poseidon, sought justice against Odysseus for poking out Cyclops' eye, sought to get back at him because of what he did to his son. But that was even throughout just that instance, there was more justice, even towards the end, whenever the suitors and Odysseus, he sought justice against them for staying in his house for all those years and tormenting his wife, per se. Let's see. Throughout the Odyssey, more so than the Iliad, there was a bunch of disguises and kind of not sneaky, kind of disguises and cunning that was used by Odysseus. Athena, who commonly disguised herself as commonly disguised herself as Odysseus' son to persuade different people to do different things. But they used him for the good to eventually come out on top, per se. Because Athena disguised Odysseus as a beggar whenever he finally made it back to Ithaca to undermine and try to go against the suitors to understand the situation, to discern and create a formal plan to eventually enact that plan and have everything lay out the way he deciphered it. Next major theme of the Odyssey is honor and glory. Its honor and glory became essentially the same from the Iliad, but still show up in Odysseus again, or the Odyssey again. But with honor, Odysseus had a lot of honor. He was glorious. He took honor in calling out to the Cyclops and wanted to glorify himself for poking out his eye, telling him he was the one that poked out his eye, not that's just nobody. From what he had told the Cyclops to trick him, that nobody poked out his eye. He wanted to be the one to tell him, and he did, and that is what caused him to strife with Poseidon. But honor and glory can be a great thing, or it can bring you down, because it can be evaluated different ways by different people. Memory. In the fourth theme of the Odyssey, it was a recurring thing, was memory and grief from that memory. As Odysseus recalled what had happened between the end of the Trojan War and up to the point where he was up to the Plataeans, trying to ask them for help to get back home, there was a lot of grief as he traveled, and as he traveled to the underworld, the island, the land of the dead, that his fellow soldiers were grieving, because they feared going to the land of the dead. And also, his wife, Penelope, was also grieving the fact that she knew her husband would return, but she longed to see him. She grieved in anguish to the fact that he had not came home yet as well. So it wasn't just with Odysseus that he grieved. It was most of the characters had some point of grief, yet it was still the remembering. Memories can haunt you. You know, it's kind of everybody knows how. I mean, once you remember something, you can't forget it. If it sticks in there, if it's something it's a pivotal point, then you're never gonna forget. The last theme of the Odyssey is vengeance, which plays in part with the Iliad. Vengeances, they both cross over. Vengeance. Odysseus enacted vengeance on, well, not too many in Odyssey. The most significant event would be at the very end when he took vengeance on the suitors and destroyed them all, and then slaughtered them with his son Telemachus, and destroyed them because of the grief and the struggle they had caused with his wife, because they had kept pursuing and bugging her, and in other words, annoying her to try to get her to marry them. But he took vengeance on that fact, and slaughtered them, as he, as any man would, take vengeance on someone who was trying to harm his wife. But yes. So all in all, though, the Odyssey and the Iliad are very similar. They're not. I mean, even though the Iliad focused on war and the Odyssey focused on one man trying to get home from the war, they still have the same themes and same characteristics that you would find, in most other ancient Greek works. So, but they do carry along very well. And I enjoyed them. I enjoyed them. They were longer than anything else I've formerly read, and I honestly didn't know they were poems until the very end, but I overall enjoyed them. So, thank you for sticking with me. Maybe you make it to the end of the video. Who knows? I'm sure you, being the teacher, you might have to. But I will see you next time.